Salve Regina.
Right now, we are live. And good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're tuning in from or whenever you're watching this. We are going to bring you a very, very special show this evening. We're happy to be with you all. I am joined by my dear brother, James from Divine Mercy Apologetics, and of course, my dear friend, the great, the master, the Reverend Dr. Kappes, who does not need an introduction. But how's everybody doing? Father, how have you been? How are you doing tonight?
Doing well, William. Looks like you're active as usual. This is your second show today.
Sure is. Yeah, I had a lot of fun earlier, and we referred to our canon book a whole lot earlier. That was a lot of fun when we were going over certain arguments from Dr. Ortland. So if anybody hasn't, and by the way, you came up quite often because Gary is pretty excited at that article of his that will be coming out rather soon on Josephus. So a lot of canon stuff earlier, and if people haven't checked that stream out, check it out. We did a stream earlier, and now we're back, and now we're talking papacy stuff. And Brother James, how have you been, my friend?
I'm not bad. How are you guys? God bless you guys. Thank you for having me. And as usual, I love you all.
Thank you. James, I'm going to put you in the spot. Would you be so gracious as to open us up with a prayer?
Of course. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
Awesome. Great job. Happy to be with everybody here. And so this has been, as far as I know, for the past several years, has been a hot topic that gets brought up very often. And indeed, this has been, let me remove this just briefly. This has been perhaps one of the most requested shows that we have ever had. Now, we've done a number of shows already in the papacy, and we're thrilled to be back now doing one on Pope Vigilius. We've never done a show on that here on my channel before. This is a very hot topic. Every now and then it'll get brought up in an attempt to stick it to Catholics, apparently. But Father, you've dug into some stuff. You pulled up some stuff. You've played around there in the TLG, the Thesaurus Lingua Grece, and you've got some great slides that the brother James put together. I never take credit for his work. His work is phenomenal. I've tried to mimic it, and I simply cannot. So it's just phenomenal. When I try to mimic it, and I do half as good a work, then he just even perfects it. So James, thank you for that as well. But this has been fun going over this, hasn't it, James?
Oh, it's insane. It's definitely it's earth-shattering for the ones that want to try to erode papal charisms. You know?
Yes, no doubt. Father, perhaps any initial thoughts? Had you ever? I know you had briefly maybe when we were working on the papacy book, briefly looked at this. I'm not sure if you'd ever dug and dived in as much as you have this time around.
Well, we looked at it with the papacy book. I do teach, what do you want to say, Christology. I just received a text that I think one of my students is examining me on this show tonight. So,
there you go. Very good.
But he just let me know. I think that because I teach the history of dogmas over the first probably 15 centuries, I have spent some time over the years in Vigilius, but it's never been something that I've done as a research project where I published a lot on. So this is more or less the fruits of stuff I've run across over the years, and also the work that we did on the papacy book, which it sounds like you enjoyed very much, from what I understand, James, which is the reason why we write, is so that people can enjoy this.
Yeah. The Immaculate Conception book as well. Like perfect. Monster book. By the way, guys, if you guys are interested in the papacy or Mariology, specifically the Immaculate Conception, Reverend Dr. Kappes' book and William's book, something you should definitely look into.
Thank you, brother. So I pleased with what you were able to pull up. So let's pull up the slides, courtesy of magnificent work put together here by James. And every now and then we will alternate, James and myself, between reading them, and then we will pick Father's brains and we'll dive in. James, if you want, I'll begin, and then we can discuss this, or whatever way you prefer.
Whatever's clever. I'm game for whatever.
All right. Okay, let me go ahead and read. And Peter, the most pious deacon and notary of the most holy patriarchate of Constantinople, read the book in Greek of the Acts of the Fifth Ecumenical Council. And after the seventh session of Acts were read, two separate books in the Acts, as if they were by Vigilius, who became Pope of Rome, who is held by us in saintly memory. One book was to Justinian, who became emperor, whose fortune was pious, while the other was to Theodora, who became empress, whose memory is held by us piously, in which books there are contained what follows. We anathematize also Theodore, who became the bishop of Mopsuestia, as someone who became forever estranged from the churches and opposed to the holy fathers, who does not believe that God became the word in flesh, that is, that Christ is one hypostasis and one person and one energy. So from the outset, it seems like a lot of this controversy, a lot of what we're going to be dealing with, has to do with the one energy. Is that right, Father?
Yeah.
I believe you're
on mute, Father. You're on mute.
Yeah, so the first point here is that, to my knowledge, these have not been translated into English, so I just up and translated them very, very quickly. The first thing that we should see is that the Sixth Ecumenical Council has declared Vigilius of saintly memory. We see that this is also done of Augustine for the ecumenical councils, as well as many others who are canonized saints. The form of expression here does suggest that he has not been formally canonized to me. I can't say I've made a study of the way in which this is expressed, but that's my suspicion. But nonetheless, it's clear that the entire council fathers are referring to him as if he were a saint. In the same way that you and I might do that, let's say, with some of us would like Venerable Pope Pius XII, or we could think of some others before Padre Pio was canonized, probably when he was venerable, and these sorts of things. So the second thing that we need to be looking at in this is that there's a claim. And this claim is that Vigilius wrote a document. That document was written in 548. He had two copies, one by his own hand and one by the hand of his secretary. They would have differed just because they were written by two different people and different kinds of mistakes or edits would have been made. So we're going to call them two different documents. They're called the Judicatum 1 and the Judicatum 2 in 548 AD. In those documents, what we would read from most people nowadays that write in the English language, whoever they are, is that Vigilius committed a doctrinal error by using the word one energy, that Jesus Christ, the God-man, has one energy. And anything that you think, James or William, that we need to add for context here, because of you're dealing with people that are really interested in this topic or who are ignorant of this topic? Do you want to need to contextualize that anymore?
No, I think you hit it right on the nose. Actually,
Yeah,
the accusation, the accusation is monoenergism,
Right.
and the claim that is rather anti-papal is to say that he fell into monoenergism and he made contradictory statements, precisely as you said.
Okay, so that's the claim of the Council Acts that we see here. And of course, we have another slide that's going to deal with what is the response of all the fathers in unison, which will be repeated again by a vote when they hear this accusation made of Vigilius. So this is an ecumenical council that is bringing the matter forth, and now they're going to be deciding the matter. Go ahead.
So, by the way, this is just for clarification, Father, this is the Acts of Constantinople 3 in the Greek, right?
Right. Did I say 3 or 2?
No, I'm just going to clarify for people listening.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
it is.
This is the Ecumenical Council in 680 AD. And we're going to find out what kind of stuff they have in their possession.
Perfect.
Great.
And once more, they who represented the position of the apostolic throne of Elder Rome stood up along with other God-loving men too, and they cried out and said, "My God, do no such thing. O Lord, Vigilius did not say one energy. The books, libelli, are not those belonging to Vigilius, and this book was forged, just as to the introduction to the first book presented of the Fifth Synod. Since, O Lord, if Vigilius dogmatized one energy and accepted this from the Synod, such a kind of doctrine too would be in the definition of the Holy Fifth Synod on the topic of one energy they would have taken up. But after just this definition was read out loud, O most pious Lord Emperor, the Lord reveals the truth. Indeed, according to the true copy and order of the aforesaid book that was read aloud to us until the section of the definition, and after the very definition until the very end was read, there was nothing whatsoever. Let me repeat that. There was nothing whatsoever from the book carried in regarding one energy found in this definition.
That's pretty significant.
There's nothing
So I haven't been following all the debates back and forth. You and James, you know better, and then William will know second best, and really all know third best. My very general impression is that people consider themselves pundits on the Fifth Ecumenical Council. They consider themselves reading in between the lines of various versions of the minutes of that council, not really understanding how minutes work. But the more important point is they historically talk about Vigilius either being condemned or not being accepted by the church. What we have here is the first official judgment of the matter of the 7th and the 8th sessions of the Constantinople II. And as far as an ecumenical council is concerned, its acts, these will all be voted on in the readings that we'll have later. They all consider him of saintly memory. They consider his writings orthodox, and the Greek copies that are held in the Archbishop's Chancery, it was a sealed library, the authenticated acts are read in their entirety to the assembly. And those authenticated acts do not contain the words one energy. So that is what we're reading here. Now, I'll get into historians. They're allowed to opine different things because they just have to deal with all the kind of messy evidence. But as far as canonists and theologians, people that accept the decrees and canons of ecumenical councils because they are religious persons, or canonists, people that follow the rulings of ecumenical councils because their law codes of their churches, except the Sixth Ecumenical Council, should not be able to presume to have a judgment higher than the Sixth Ecumenical Council. And yet here we are 3 years, as far as I know, back, dealing with people that are pundits that are taking judgments, interpretations for themselves. But the judgment's already been rendered, and it was rendered about 1,300 years ago. Anything from you guys?
No, I think that's precise. I think what you just said is true. I think a lot of people are usurping, ecclesial judgment, conciliary judgment that should be final if you are Catholic or Orthodox. And they are, in essence, mutating said judgment to fashion some sort of argument against the papacy. But it's definitely gonna backfire today.
Yeah, I think a big thing that we need to understand is the misuse of history. Just like, to use an extreme example, which I'm not calling these individuals the extreme examples, but just like Nazis can use the corded wear culture,
right,
in order to justify having a dominant race that has some archaeological pottery that they knew at the time, and some signs of a particular race that had the wheel and the horse that began to dominate the world. And so they use that historical archaeology in order to advance themselves as the master race. In a very similar way, to use some evidence that there were some debates and some conflicts between Vigilius and either patriarchs and or emperors as somehow evidence of his condemnation or evidence of somehow his unorthodoxy. That may be interesting speculation from a historical point of view, and that work needs to be done by a historian. But for a believer who holds that there are ecumenical councils and we are bound by their decisions, or if they're not infallible decisions, that they're legal, that is, their juridical judgments are final when it comes to the orthodoxy or unorthodoxy of people. Basically, we have an entire industry the last 3 years that has been built off of not knowing what the ecumenical councils have said.
Sure.
Yeah, no doubt. That's a great point. And you're right. James, I'm pretty sure you'd be very well aware of how often this argument gets tossed out there as one of your primary fields of work is papacy. In fact, you live and breathe papacy. You know that very well. This is one of the arguments that for a long time has been used against Catholics. And I think that the material that we've got and we're presenting today is definitely going to change that landscape. What are your thoughts?
It's definitely okay. So I'm not going to say any names, but we have someone to blame for this shift in thought regarding Vigilius in the last 3 to 4 years. I'm not going to say any names, but I will say they've assembled a list, Father. So like Liberius, Vigilius, and Honorius. These are the 3 that they like to use against papal claims. Now, Liberius is it's a no-go. It's an easy understanding. Vigilius is the one they really press on, and today I think Vigilius is over for them. I think they've used every bit of, they've incorrectly and falsified history enough. Right, today is the last they'll ever do that.
And I think a lot of this, Father, had not, as far as I know, had not been translated in English. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think this is another lesson for us who, many of us do try to read as much as we can in the languages that we can. There's no substitute for becoming a scholar, or at least becoming a linguist.
Right.
And reading all the documents that precede and possibly influence this, and the subsequent documents that are affected by whatever I'm studying, in order to gain insights. And if you don't have the ability to read all that stuff, at best, you're going to be an amateur in the positive sense, which means, you're good for the discussion because you're getting people interested. You're an enthusiast. That's good. Once you become an expert in your own mind, and you admittedly have not read the Acts of the Sixth Ecumenical Council because they're very, very long and they're in Greek. now we've got a problem. Spending 3 years of debating this issue and not having access to a fundamental piece of the puzzle, if you're claiming to have an impact on theology or canon law. I'm not talking about having an impact on history, but the people that I've seen that are tending to talk about this, they think of themselves as representing a religious mindset, not as representing a debate amongst historians, that they're going to publish a monograph on this in a historian's journal. They think that people should leave or adopt a particular faith as a result of their ideas.
Yeah, great point. Fantastic.
Let's move on to the next, because we're not done. What does Constantine, the emperor, respond?
Yep. Let me go ahead and read it. You want to read it, brother? Or you want me to dive in?
No, go for it.
Okay. Then Theodore and George, the most pious presbyters, and John, the most pious deacon, they who hold the place of the most holy pope of the apostolic throne of elder Rome, said, "We request your divinely wise, serene person to examine it closely and condemn the book that was read at this opportune time on the matter of the forged part that has surfaced only to be highlighted in the Acts."
You know, I gotta say something. I'm sorry. I have to. It's I don't know, Father. I don't know if you'll espouse the statement, but someone must have read this.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Meaning, someone that has a capacity to read Greek.
Yes, and not just that. A lot of these guys that have, you know, if I'm gonna fashion an argument against the papacy, I'm gonna look into every piece of evidence, every single source, every single citation. I'm gonna look at everywhere Pope Vigilius is mentioned. I know someone must have come across these quotes, and if they hadn't, or if they have and they've suppressed it, then I'm just tempted to say that people are privy towards dishonesty, and I think that's more appalling than anything else. It's like you're almost trying to uphold some sort of ecclesial truth, some sort of, you know, theological truth, but you're underpinning this truth upon, you know, falsifications and lies and dishonesty. And I think this is highly problematic for anyone who attempts to, you know, go after papal primacy.
Yep.
There was a question I saw in the chat. I am trying to pay a little bit of attention to that.
Goodness, I have you seen.
And that is, where does the Greek come from? There's two easy to get places. I got mine for free off the internet. I didn't have to go to a special library. The older version is very, very famous, named by the name of Mansi, MANSI. You can pretty much get that from multiple sources by just looking for downloads. I'll let William or someone type Mansi.
Yeah.
You know that name, do you not, William?
Yes, definitely. Oh, yeah, no doubt.
They can be kind of hard to read sometimes because of the way that they're copied. The other one is the Acta Conciliorum Oecumenicorum, which is also available on archive.org, among other places. So this stuff's not hard to get. I just pulled it up and looked at it. So I would assume that any Eastern Orthodox who has an interest in his own church's ecumenical councils and who has a smattering of Greek, or in some cases Latin, can just read these at will. So I'm not opening up a secret archive here. This has been available on the internet since as long as this whole debate has gone on for the last 3 years.
Now, I know you did some searching. I guess you search words or something in the TLG.
The TLG will also contains this, yeah. So you'll also find it there. Oh. Great. At this point, then,
sorry,
go ahead.
Are the Latin manuscripts lacking in terms of sessions?
You know, meaning how do they refer to the individual sessions of Constantinople III?
Yeah, because when I start with like more difficult translations, but then I start with easy translations and I go into more, you know, critical translators. So like even when I went into Schaff, just Schaff, right, who we know is very basic. I think he only enlists, like I said, the 3rd, the 8th, and the 11th and the 16th session.
There's so I think that this is the Fathers of the Church series that he put together, right? The Nicene, anti-Nicene Fathers, something
That's
like
correct. Yeah, a little outdated. But, I mean,
that. I
still
think
decent.
that there is a rubrical note that says that it's selections.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're not going to get the complete acts because they're just so large.
Okay.
And for our readers, I mean, we've done this in my theology class that we had on William's channel.
Yep.
When you think of acts, you need to be thinking of minutes. So I go to my Rotary Club meeting, and we all sit down and we have a minute taker.
Right.
And the minute taker is kind of left to his wisdom in taking minutes to pick what stuff is relevant or not. And then there's a process after the minutes are taken. This is just Robert's Rules of Order, right? So we have to send out those minutes for everybody to look at. And if we all remember stuff the same way, then we approve the minutes as they're read out. If we remember things differently, or we wrote down our own stuff, or if something that I introduced into the group wasn't included in an appendix, then we amend the minutes. And so there's a lot of people who are going crazy because of these amended minutes. So if in 553 the minutes say one thing, allegedly about Vigilius, let's say something negative, the meeting's not done until what year? 555. When do you finally amend the minutes to reflect how everybody remembers and wants the official record to look?
Right.
555.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know anyone that accepts the minutes in medias res in the middle of the discussion, and they approve those as the definitive minutes for a meeting, and then they claim that everybody messed up the minutes because later they had to get together and read off the minutes, and people actually redacted them on how they wanted the official minutes to look. I mean, this is the kind of craziness that we deal with. They don't understand what minutes are.
Yeah.
Right. And you actually see it happening at the moment right now. We request your divinely wise, serene person to examine closely and contend the book. Right. Yeah. That's literally what you just defined is occurring.
Right. And then we'll see in later sessions that they bring this out and they put it officially in the minutes that they've discovered that the so-called monophysite reading is, or monoenergist reading is fake. Now, Richard Price, as a historian and a very good one, is going to draw attention to the fact that there's two sides to this story, and that's important. His own way of talking about this is, one, we don't have any longer the Greek manuscript of 555 or 553. All we have is a Latin one. It's a pretty good one, but that's what we have. And he's also going to talk about the fact that we can't disprove what the Council Fathers are saying here. He doesn't like what they're saying. His opinion is that there is more in favor of the monoenergist reading, in his opinion, than there is in the favor of the Greek Fathers. And that's fine as a historian. I mean, in the absence of data, you can throw your guesswork wherever you want.
Sure.
His is based off of his own reasoning. But as a theologian or a canonist, you get to throw out ecumenical councils because there might have been a historical problem that you can't solve. And that's what we're dealing with nowadays in this debate. People who don't understand that to be a historian is to deal with items that we can't reconcile and we have to make best guesses about without trying to bring in religious prejudices, if we can. Versus those of us who start with a religion with a religious prejudice. For example, the religious prejudice is an ecumenical council is the supreme authority in Christianity. Then we have to follow that supreme authority.
Right.
Richard Price is not approaching this question from that perspective, so he's not obliged to conclude in agreement with the ecumenical council. So I think we also need to see here that according to the minutes that were approved by the fathers, they, as a whole, remember that the entire document was read around. Now, Richard Price is willing to admit that what the acts here reveal is that there may have been a marginal note. So you guys have any book that you open up, you have blank space around your page, just like you do in a Word document. It was very common for scholars to write in that blank space marginal notes. Now, Price's argument is that even if there's a marginal note, he wants to attribute that marginal note to Vigilius. And that's fine if he thinks that he has really good knowledge of how people read 6th century papal documents, and that if they saw a marginal note in a 6th century papal, now this is not his argument. I'm saying maybe he knows 6th century Latin decretals really, really well. And he can tell you that having read 100 Latin decretals from the 10 or 15 years before to the 10 or 15 years after Vigilius, anytime that there's a marginal note in a papal decretal, it's always taken as written by the Pope, or under certain circumstances it is. And those are the circumstances that we imagine that Vigilius is written. This is how it would have to be argued. All Price does is he makes a very quick comment that it may have been a marginal note, but it still was probably written by Vigilius. But you notice how he conditions everything. He's not a absolutist. Probably for Price. Would it be probably for somebody else? I'd like to talk to someone that's an expert on Latin papal decretals of the period and see what they think, what their gut tells them, Yeah. And what their gut tells them is probably going to be based off of percentages, not on absolutes.
Right. Probability.
Yeah, so we're going to subject an ecumenical council in theology to a bunch of percentages that it's going to be acceptable or not. It's judgment about Vigilius's orthodoxy based off of what one historian, Price, said was probably the case in his opinion, but Price hasn't exactly told us what the basis of that is. He's given us a little evidence, and it's not his fault. He gets to say whatever he wants. He's done a lot of work in his life. And so people give him space to say what he wants, and rightfully so. But we, who haven't done the work that he has done, we don't know why he thinks the way that he thinks.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on.
Very good. Yeah, definitely.
Constantine, the most pious emperor, said, "That which is requested, let the correction be done after the manner of the official other book, but let the book be read, which is present until its end."
Keep going.
And the book was read. Constantine, the most pious emperor, said, "The Holy Synod took the knowledge from the books that had just been read aloud, that is, I say, from the synodical acts, to discover if there was something defined by these same holy synods, which exact text the most holy Archbishop of Antioch, Macarius, along with the most pious men in his party, alleged to demonstrate that one will and one energy of the incarnate economy of our Lord Jesus Christ."
And you can continue.
Mm-hmm.
The Holy Synod and eminent judges said, "As you know, most eminent men, we did not find whatsoever the phrase one will and one energy of our Lord Jesus Christ as regards the incarnate economy, as he is one of the Holy Trinity, out of the Holy Synods just read now."
And continue.
Mm-hmm.
The Archbishop of Constantinople and his party said, "Most pious Lord, we request you divinely wise serenity, that a record be sent to your imperial reign, crowned by God from the most holy Agatho, Pope of the Apostolic Throne of Elder Rome, and this synod underneath him, for a hearing on what was read by us, that we take note of all the power in the book that was brought forward on the matter of these acts."
So now we have a move by Constantinople and Rome together, who claim in Latin and Greek to know the reading that is considered to be the authentic reading for official documents. Price, the historian, wants to, and he rightfully should, remind us that there are documents in Syriac which seem to suggest that Pope Vigilius did say one energy. How do we resolve this? What's interesting is, already at the Council of 680, we're going to find out who it is that introduces or seems to know of this other reading. It's already present. The one energy reading is brought forward by the Archbishop of Antioch and his party, which means that they must have a copy of these Syriac texts, and they're actually bringing the Syriac text, possibly. This is the Greek origin for those Syriac texts. They're bringing their Greek copies that are the origin of these Syriac texts, perhaps, and they want a clarification as to whether or not Vigilius said this. And now they're learning that the official books from both archives say no.
Right. Latin and Greek.
Right.
Right.
And we can continue now.
Yeah.
It's almost like if they have to hold to the falsified Vigilius claims, they have to nullify the claims of Constantinople III, right?
Right. What's going on here is not unusual, is that because everything's copied by hand, there's mistakes because a monophysite or monoenergist might be the copyist. He might insert stuff that's fake into it. They always had this problem.
Yeah,
both sides.
Right.
Sides. So to have kind of sealed and protected copies in the papal archives and a sealed protected copy in a different language in a patriarchal archive, and for these to agree, that's kind of important. Now, if I wanted to be the kind of nullify this, I would say, well, the Latin copy of the Acts that we have right now, the singular copy that we have, meaning the original copy from which two copies in the Middle Ages were made, seems to agree more with the Syrians, right? It agrees more with the Syrians than it does with the Greek and the attested Latin copies here. Okay, fine. We don't know where that copy in Latin came from. We know it's pretty early and it's probably pretty reliable. But we also know that the Acts went through stages before they were finalized and edited and published and approved under a certain kind. And we don't know exactly when. We know that the Latin version, the only surviving version that somebody like Price would use, was probably made really early. If that's the case, that may reflect a draft. That may not reflect the final version.
Right.
Yeah.
We can't really know. All we know is that both of these places have their official archive copies, their originals, and they're both saying that Vigilius is not in the authenticated copies. And an ecumenical council is voting to agree with this after the authenticated copies have been read aloud. So whatever conspiracy that one can come up with, that's fine. You just need to prove it by means of evidence. And since we have lost the Greek and the Latin copies that were used at Constantinople III, all we have is the Latin copy, which we don't know exactly where it came from, and we don't know who copied it, that has survived in the Western Church. That's all we have.
Yeah, that's tremendous.
So what you're saying is the head of the Latin, the head of the Greek, the Constantinople, they've agreed that within their authenticated transcripts, there is no mention of monophysitism,
right,
or monothelitism or monoenergism vis-a-vis Pope Vigilius.
Correct.
So that means they would have, if they are faithful to their church, they would hold to the decrees of their church, right?
Correct. Anyone who claims that these first 7 ecumenical councils, or at least this 6th ecumenical council, is part of their deposit of faith, would presumably accept the judgments of all the fathers on matters of legality, on canons, and on religious decrees. Yeah.
Fantastic. Great. Let's go to the next one. Let me read
Continue.
this one. Yeah, let me read this one. Constantine, the most pious kind, said, "What has been requested by you shall be accomplished in line with the official other copy of the book." Now, Constantinople, 3rd, session 12.
Okay, so this is after everything was done. This whole beginning investigation was done. Now they're going to approve this is towards the final version of the minutes. Here's what they do at the end, towards the end of the council. Let's see what they say.
The Acts, for perpetual memory and approved thereafter by all the council fathers,
Wow.
begins by noting that the gathering takes place underneath the imperial dome, Trullo, and that the council fathers, bishops invited to vote, sit there during this presentation for their collective judgment and decision. That is quite significant.
Right.
That is very significant.
All the council fathers is pretty bad. That's what's very striking about this. It says all the council fathers.
Yeah, no doubt. It's right there. Approved thereafter by all the council fathers. That's very significant. Any particular thoughts on this, Father?
Yeah, why don't we go ahead and just read through the entire thing so we can get
Okay.
through the text, and then we can maybe make our final
Yeah.
comments.
If you need me to stop at any point, let me know. Okay. Therefore, we affirm that there was never a parliamentary motion about one energy in the great and holy ecumenical synods on the aforementioned topic, nor is there a definition on such a kind of question proposed by one of the Orthodox synods. Yet also Menas of holy memory, the former archbishop, guarded by God of this holy city, composed a sermon which was addressed to Vigilius, once the most holy Pope of Elder Rome, in which document Menas even dogmatized in a similar manner the one will of Christ and one life-giving energy.
So that's the claim. Go ahead.
Yep, definitely. Okay, here we go. And as session 12, Constantinople 3. And after the end of this reading of the letter, the same religiously minded Antiochus reread the sermon from the same codex, as it were of the one-time Archbishop of Constantinople, Menas, to Vigilius, Pope of Rome. And when this was reread, the glorious judges and holy council acclaimed, "This present reading is too much for us, since it is forged and falsified, as neither is it found here in the archives of Menas of holy memory, as there were discovered 3 false folios inserted into a sermon. Wow. The acts of the Fifth Council have been clearly read to us, but we have even memorized them."
They memorized them because they were just read aloud earlier in the council, right?
Right, definitely.
And what's important here is Price is willing to, as a historian, accept the falsification because of them talking about pulling out the folios.
Right.
He's not going to claim that they're just pretending that there are folios. That seems to be too much of a stretch. What he wants to doubt all the fathers on is that they really read out copies from the 2 Cs that didn't have any mention of one energy, and that's where he comes up with his supposition that it might have been in the marginal notes, and therefore they could deny that it was written by Vigilius. But he opines that even if it was in the marginal notes, it would still be, Vigilius's notes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the question is, this is an interesting one. Is let's put it in our own context. It may not actually be the same, but let's think about it in our context. You have Vatican I, and it has a footnote. Am I dogmatically bound to the footnote, or am I just bound to the text? That would be the kind of question we would be asking today.
Exactly.
You see?
Yeah. And when you put it in that context, you lay it out like that, it's very clear what we are bound to. We're not bound to mere footnotes. That's a very, very good point that you lay that out. You lay it out in that particular way. Should we continue on?
Continue.
Well, considering the whole argument, sorry, forgive me, guys.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
The whole argument, well, a lot of it's going to hinge on a particular footnote as well that isn't in the councils, right?
Sure. Yeah, no doubt. Let's dive in. You want to read this one, James?
Sure. Again, the most pious Antiochus, reading the same selection from the 7th and 8th acts of the Fifth Holy Ecumenical Council, now lost in Greek and available only in Latin, transcribed authoritatively from the archival registers as pure in the Patriarchate. Then, after this reading occurred, the glorious judge and the Holy Synod asserted, "It is already the case that the present Acts 2 of the 7th and 8th sessions, after the fashion of the present reading of the Holy Fifth Ecumenical Council, have clarified the matter for us, but we have even memorized them. Now, in this case of those persons from the apostolic throne of Elder Rome, people went so far as to falsify the aforementioned 7th session of Constantinople II of Acts insofar as these two books as in it, sorry, one second, in it are not true that they brought with them, which they were treated as if they were from Vigilius to Justinian and Theodora of pious memory.
And this is what are called the Judicatum 1 and the Judicatum 2.
And the reading of the two aforementioned sessions of Acts settled the matter of Vigilius's alleged texts as superfluous.
Wow. So, settled the matter is how the Ecumenical Council saw it. They were familiar with the fact that there were different editions of the minutes because there were probably the unapproved minutes and the approved minutes. It could be as simple as the fathers of the Sixth Council seeing two competing pieces of minutes called the minutes that had not been officially preserved in the archives falsified when they may have just been immature minutes, right?
Right.
Minutes that needed to be corrected because Vigilius had joined the council. And so now they were going to say nice things about him because he wasn't snubbing them. And so the way that everyone approved how the council sessions went was only remembering the good things that were said about Vigilius, or entering amendments that good things should be said of Vigilius. And so, I do this all the time at my faculty meetings. If you want to call inserting something doctoring minutes, it depends on the conventions. What are the conventions of minute taking? If you get a date wrong that somebody actually said, and you all want to correct it so you get the right date in there, is that doctoring the minutes, or is that making the minutes actually actionable? And so we could debate till the cows come home. What is turning minutes from accurate into inaccurate, or true into false? Right. But what is true here is that both Price and the fathers admit that there are different versions of both the Judicatum, one with one energy and one without, and that the 7th and the 8th session of the Acts have different versions. Price wants to emphasize the fact that there were more negative ways of looking at the Pope in the pre-reconciled versions, whereas in the post-reconciled versions, when Vigilius is going home, one with the council in 555, the final version of the minutes play nice with Vigilius. Of course they will. What are the version of the minutes that were approved by all the patriarchs, all the voting members that were bishops, and ultimately by the Pope of Rome? The finalized version. That's the version of the minutes, the decrees, and the canons, which is dogmatically imposed on the church, not drafts. Right. We have tons of drafts of Vatican I and Vatican II documents. None of those drafts have any bearing on our religion.
And they also entail Vigilius as sound in his orthodoxy, correct?
Correct. Yeah, certainly.
That is the key.
Mm-hmm. And I think that was our last reading, or do we still have one more from the Greek Acts?
I just put, if you want to go next one, William.
Yeah, let's do the last one then.
No, there's more. I just put it there for people to see.
Oh yeah, this is just so you guys can see. This is the Thesaurus Linguae Graecae, the TLG. You can easily get everything that I just had there. If you know Greek, you'll probably do a better job of putting it in English than I did. It took me, 10 minutes to do all this. I did it very hurriedly, having translated whole books from Greek. Undoubtedly, there's some turns of phrase that I would use differently if I had time. But you've received the substance of this.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that is. Was there more, James?
There's more. Yeah, there's more.
Yeah, let's keep going then.
Okay.
Furthermore, Lateran.
Okay.
This may. Let me see if this should come up later. Why don't we? What do you want to call it? Table that for now.
Okay.
And let's go to the document one that I provided you guys with.
Do you remember what slide that is, James?
It's the Word document called Vigilius 1. If you made any slides from that, then you're welcome to put those up.
Okay, are you talking about the two excerpts from the book?
The paper that I have is called Vigilius and One Energy, Historians' Non-Theological Conjectured History of the Problem of One Energy.
You'll have to. Oof, I don't know.
Let me see.
If you don't have those, that's fine. William, you have that paper. You can pull it up for everyone to see with a screen share, can't you?
Yeah, definitely. It is the historians. Yeah. I got that one.
I have it entitled Vigilius 1.
Yep. Yeah, I sent it to you, James, but it probably get, since I sent you two back to back, that one probably got buried under the pile.
Well, not just that, the pictures in them. I don't know if you added any graphics, Father Kappes, but they didn't come up. I don't know why.
Ah, weird. Okay, it's okay. I got it right here. I'm converting it so that I can upload it. It'll take maybe about 30 seconds, not even.
Okay, so I'm going to do a little preface, and then I'll let you guys comment. The first paper that I prepared is on the topic of what I call Vigilius and One Energy. I subtitle it Historians, meaning possessive, Historians' Non-Theological Conjectured History of the Problem of One Energy. And there you can see it. So hopefully you can make that as convenient and as big as it needs to be for everybody to see it. So at the very tippy top there of my little chart, we'll see that the word one energy goes back to the heretic Apollinaris of Laodicea. And of course, since I did this all in a very quick...
Can you zoom in, William?
I'm trying to figure out how to zoom in.
But Apollinaris is writing in the 4th century. He's the first person to come up with one energy. One energy with regard to the God-man, Jesus Christ. Now, his writings influence two branches that I'm interested in. One branch is actually Cyril of Alexandria, who's south and to the left.
Yeah.
So Cyril of Alexandria borrows heavily from Apollinaris, but he corrects his theological errors. In the 6th century, when the Church of Antioch kept pounding at the Egyptian church, telling them that Cyril was borrowing from Apollinaris, they were not bothered by this. They didn't show any relenting from the authority of the text that Cyril was using. So it wasn't a question of whether or not the text was written by a heretic for them. It was a question of whether or not Cyril had, purified it and kind of canonized it. On the right, we see this word one energy picked up by a fellow that many of you might know as Dionysius the Areopagite. So that's to the right. Dionysius the Areopagite, or Pseudo-Dionysius, is a Syrian Christian. And of course, we know that he probably is familiar with Syriac. It is opined from the fragments of Dionysius's stuff that we have in Syriac that Dionysius originally, when he talked about the God-man Jesus Christ, talked about him as having one energy. We now know in Greek that we talk about him having a new energy, or we talk about him having a new theandric energy. Are you all familiar with that language?
I am not. That I am not.
So it is orthodox to say that the God-man Jesus Christ has a new energy, an energy that did not exist before the incarnation, or a new theandric energy, a God-man cooperation kind of action.
Ah, okay.
So that is what the purified or the Greek Dionysius says.
By the way, is that big enough now, Father? Are you able to see that zoomed in?
I think that's going to be a question for James or for your audience.
Let me see. How is it? Does it appear zoomed in?
It's perfect.
Okay, great. Okay, gotcha. Okay. Great. Perfect.
So, the next thing that I want to draw our attention to is Pseudo-Dionysius. He's writing around the year 515. Okay. He uses the word one energy. Everybody believes it's the real Dionysius. So they're trying to read it charitably.
Right.
The next thing that I have in our chart underneath that is that we could imagine that Justinian in the Justinian Vigilius situation, Justinian and Vigilius would have been okay with one energy language because it's coming from Dionysius. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Now, that's why at the very bottom left, the last square at the bottom left, you see that the Orthodox Council of Lateran 649, which Maximus the Confessor was the virtual author of, accepts the fact that we can talk about there being one energy in an Orthodox sense. Now you can pull up that slide, James, of Lateran.
Gotcha. Okay, back. Let me get Lateran up now. You mean that one there, right?
You want to go for it, William?
Yes, I definitely will. Yeah, let me read it. And ecumenical councils have handed down, it is to be professed that one and the same only begotten Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, the true God, performed both is divine and what is human, and that every divine and human operation proceeded without separation or fusion from one and the same God, the Word incarnate, and is to be attributed to one and the same. For the expression one operation, even if it was used by some of the fathers, nevertheless offends and upsets the hearing of some, who suppose that it leads to the abolition of the two natures.
Okay.
United.
That's
okay,
good.
Go ahead.
What did an Orthodox council authored by Maximus the Confessor and approved by Pope St. Martin I, and which provided the theological template for the Sixth Ecumenical Council just say? You're not heretical for using one energy.
Yeah, for the expression one operation, even if it was used by some of the fathers, nevertheless offends and upsets the hearing of some.
It's all about the scandal because of how it's misinterpreted.
Right.
So even if Vigilius had used the word one energy, you'd have to be some sort of fundamentalist to claim that he is heretical, because Maximus the Confessor is claiming that you can use it. Phil Booth, I believe, in his Crisis in Empire, had already made this point in a popular version, scholarly version of this whole discussion. So this is not me revealing something new. This is me revealing something that's been out there for a very long time. The term that the God-man is one energy, the old word that we might use for this would be infelicitous. It's an unhappy term.
Right.
Because it's an ambiguous term.
Oh, I see.
Right. But he also says the same thing about two operations, right? He says, likewise, the phrase two operations scandalizes many because it was not used by any of the holy and approved enlighteners of the church, right? So he's highlighting the scandal that occurs with one operation and the very same, or a scandal similar when he says likewise towards those who use the term two operations.
Mm-hmm. Now, ultimately, Sophronius and Maximus reject one operation language because it's only heretics that are pushing it. But the phrase in and of itself, I was just looking at the Thesaurus Linguae Graecae. It's used by the popular commentator on the Apocalypse, Ecumenius, the writer Evlogius. It's used by some authors of the fifth of the 500s. I didn't see any major saints that would cause me to think of it as a patristic term, but it has some validity at this time. And so let's move then let's go back to our chart.
Yep. Let me go to, give me one moment, because now I've got to, let me remove that. And
so Lateran 645 makes one operation a dead end, not because it hasn't been mentioned by people that died Orthodox, but because it's just too prone to scandal and misunderstanding, among other things.
Let me know, did I add that well? Y'all able to see? Okay, great.
And you want to focus in on the right-hand side.
Yes.
So Constantinople 553, in its minutes or its acts in Greek, has a presumably Greek version of the Judicatum 1 and 2. At this time, the fathers would have been unlikely to know any Greek. It was still being technically required probably for lawyers, but let's face it, nobody knew Greek probably after the 6th century in the East. So we have to assume that the Chancery put together a Greek version, which is part of the official acts in the Chancery. and that this Greek and Latin version agreed with one another. The next line down is that in Constantinople III, there's a reference to these documents made in the Acts and the Minutes that say that there is no reference to one energy. We've all just read all this.
Yeah.
The last thing that I note is that the Roman legates claim that they don't have it, which is, since we are aware that by and large, Latins, presumably with their names being entirely Latin as well, they are unlikely to know Greek, that they must be speaking about the Latin copies, and certainly the archival copies known to them from the Pope, who they are representing at the council. And then finally, I mentioned that the authentic Greek Acts in the archives of the Archbishop of Constantinople read without one energy. But finally, the Archbishop of Antioch and his party seem to mention that indeed there is a version at the Sixth Ecumenical Council that has the word one energy in it. And this seems to align well with the fact that Syriac scholars date probably the first mention of one energy attributed to Pope Vigilius around 580 AD, right?
Yeah.
So either they got a bad copy, they got a Monophysite handled copy. They could have gotten a good copy. As a historian, we could say that. But the fathers of the council were unconvinced by that argument, and they rejected it. And their final judgment doctrinally was that Vigilius was orthodox, that he never wrote that, and that the falsifications in the text that they themselves discovered in the authentic codexes prove it. And because we do not have either a copy of the official Latin codex or the official Greek codex, which has survived, we can't refute those fathers. We can only opine as historians to think that they had too much invested, they had too much to lose by admitting that the Syriac people were right. So we as historians are going to throw in our lot with the Syrians. That's basically what we're doing. Any questions or comments on all that?
No, it's pretty self-evident. It's pretty clear, actually.
Yeah, I think that's really clear.
So no reference in the Greek, no reference in the Latin, perhaps a reference in the Syriac in the year 580 AD.
Right. Definitely Syriac fragments have been found. So people like Sebastian Brock and other scholars have done that. So we do know that there's a double witness. There's the Latin Acts that we have preserved, which were copied very early after the council. So what edition they reflect, we can ask that question. Secondly, those acts may actually reflect an early copy in the papal archives. It's not certain, but it's possible. And the Syriac acts may have been made from that copy that the Archbishop of Antioch seems to have a hold of in his archives. And if that's the case, those Syriac version may have just been adopting what it said in the Greek, or it may have been falsified,
or a draft.
Right, or another draft.
Wow.
So we have all kinds of things to think about, right? So am I going to build an entire theology against the papacy based off of these kinds of conjecture? Apparently, it's something that you can have a super chat on.
Yeah, very, very bad arguments. Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. Okay, so here's my little bullet points. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I put it for you. I did it.
Is that the one that's theologians and canonist obligations in light of Constantinople?
Yes.
All right, so here's what I conclude we are obliged to as believing Christians if we want to be talking theologically. Would you read those off, either of you?
Yeah, I'll read them. I'll go ahead and dive in. In light of Constantinople III, historians must try to identify facts of archaeology, example given, and they create stories, link together archaeological material in a series of presumed cause-effect relationships. As we know, history is good storytelling, and good history tries to get at the causes of events without the ability to know most cause-effect relationships and circumstances in antiquity. History is useful for context and probability, and is not in antiquity a science, nor in modernity a hard science. History is useful, but is about degrees of probability of storytelling based upon historians' consensus and their editors and publishers.
Right.
So, and do you have my conclusion next?
Yeah, I put it all there.
Oh, great.
Okay. Yes, let's move.
So here is my conclusion, dogmatically.
Mhm.
The judgment.
Go ahead.
Oh, go for it. Do you want?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Is this with the reference to Melchior Cano?
No, I didn't put it. Did you?
Okay, let me preface that then.
Okay.
So we've taken Saint Vincent of Lerins, who is rather famous. I'm going to call him a dogmatic theologian, who came up with trying to find all the places that you and I go to, scripture, tradition, that it can be authorities for us to make theological arguments.
Yeah.
That was, I'll call it mathematized or systematized even better in the 16th century by Melchior Cano. So St. Vincent of Lerins, writing in the 5th century after the Council of Ephesus, systematizes all the places that we go to get authoritative theological arguments. Melchior Cano even does a more scientific broadening of this in his work called De Locis Theologicis. And so what he does is he tells us all the authoritative places that we can go to. And I think I provided a Venn diagram, which this doesn't look like this is the Venn diagram.
It didn't like I said, the graphic.
Oh yeah, it didn't work.
Yeah, I don't know why, Father.
That's okay. That's okay.
I put everything I possibly could in terms of
no problem. So here, listen to what the here are the sources for theology in their order of importance or authority, according to St. Vincent of Lerins, as understood and systematized by Melchior Cano in the 16th century. Scripture is number one. That's no surprise for everybody. Something called tradition is number two. No surprise for anybody. Number three, I'm going to call together the teaching of the Apostolic See and the Ecumenical Councils. Next is the teaching of the Fathers. No surprise. Next is human reason. You have to think about how to put these things together, whether we're in Islam or Orthodoxy or Catholicism. You have to be able to, as a reasonable human being, put together arguments. Arguments require a reasoning process. And so all three of them do have a place for reasoning. So we have a reasoning process about how to make sense of the Fathers, together with the Ecumenical Councils, together with the tradition and the Scripture. The next next place that we might go to get ideas on dogma is the consensus of the faithful. But how do you poll all the faithful of the world? That's the problem.
Right.
Is it when they do crowds, demonstrations? Do I count the living and the dead, or only the living as the faithful? How do you poll an angel? Is it percentage majority or absolute majority? So that's the reason why this is one of the lowest places that we go to for understanding dogmas. And then the final places that we go to understanding dogmas is philosophy and history.
Yeah.
So in theology, history is the weakest argument, not the strongest. In history, archives and archaeological artifacts are the strongest evidence. In theology, scripture, tradition, ecumenical councils, decrees of pontiffs, the multiple testimonies of fathers, and how one reasons with all that, those are the most authoritative arguments. So when you hear individuals who are saying, oh, I don't have to accept this ecumenical council or that ecumenical council's decree on Vigilius because history tells me, something's pretty wrong there. They're not thinking with the church, whatever their church may be. They're not according to the mind of the fathers or the church. They're claiming that history gives them a special superpower to exempt themselves from anything that they don't like because they have a historical reason not to like it, or to embrace anything that they already like because history also tells them that they're right. So that's how I would see it. Any comments or anything else?
Perfect. I thought that was fantastic. Let me see. I think we have about. Let me go ahead.
You should still read the one before this one first.
Oh, the one. Oh, this one.
Yeah,
my bad.
Yeah.
My bad. I thought I'd read it. My bad. Let me read this. Yeah. The judgment of Constantinople III on Vigilius is on his orthodoxy and on his authentic works. And he is asserted by the fathers in unison to be saintly in memory, that the authentic version of his judicatum does not contain one energy, that obvious falsifications, forgeries were discovered, and that the Roman and Greek acts agree against the manuscript from Antioch. Is that a correct assessment, Father?
That's how I see it.
Yeah, fantastic.
That's what I read.
Yeah, excellent. So in conclusion,
if anyone wants to read them all and translate them and do a more precise job, then we should all thank them.
Yeah, no. If they think they can do better, which would be that's quite a tall task. Yeah, no doubt. But this is great. These are great points. So what can we conclude? A Catholic Orthodox theologian has no authority to arrogate to himself the designation of a saintly person and the orthodoxy of his works to be heretical in the name of the supreme authority of his church. Historians are theologically valuable only for contextualizing dogmatic and juridical acts. They may provide better access to the meaning and scope of statements and declarations. However, even here, the supreme living authority is the final interpreter by divine mandate, and very clearly you can find that to be scriptural. Matthew 16:18, Matthew 18:18. And no Catholic and no Orthodox would disagree with that statement because this is very clearly in our faith. A Catholic Orthodox canonist is obliged to uphold in conscience the judgments on matters of, is that heresy, right? Heresy and orthodoxy of the supreme authority, not historians. Any desire on a canonical matter like this must be resubmitted to the supreme authority for re-examination, and arguments can be made for the cause on non-dogmatic judgment. But the position of one school is determined by an ecumenical council, not by questions regarding archaeology.
Those
fantastic.
Are my conclusions.
Yeah. Now that's masterful. Yeah.
Any final words on the question of the one energy, its conclusions or arguments?
So Petros had one. If you want to,
Let me. Why don't we take any? Let's take any questions on this, because then we have part 2, which is also exciting.
Yeah.
Part 2 is going to deal with the self-contradiction of the Constitutum 1, the don't condemn dead people, and then Constitutum 2, condemn dead people. We're going to deal with that.
Fantastic. Let me go up. Go ahead, brother.
By the way, slide 19 is the footnote of Dr. Father Richard Price. If you want to put that up as well, because
we can put it up just so people can see.
There we go. My bad. Okay.
Now the whole thing isn't that valuable. Let's see.
I've highlighted the red where he implements that.
Yeah, there you go. What does it say?
Says this is in his footnotes for the Lateran Council about the third session. He remarks, the most important document in the Libellus of Minas to Pope Vigilius, which included a statement of the one operation and one will, see Winckelmann 201 2001. He dates it to 552. It was an important text for the monergists, monoenergists, and the monothelites. See its citation in the monothelite for Florilegium. I'm so sorry. In Brock's 1985 work, but was condemned as a fake. Look what he writes in the footnotes. It was condemned as a fake in the Acts of the Sixth Ecumenical Council. So this is where Reverend Father Kappes properly highlighted earlier. He's giving you both sides of the coin, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Nevertheless, there is little reason to doubt its authenticity. Not least it is clear that earlier opponents of monoenergism and monothelitism thought it genuine. See disputations at Bizier 4 and disputations with Pyrrhus in the Patrologia Graecae.
So he's not willing to die over that statement, but he does put it in very favorable statement towards the Syriac position on this.
I see. Doesn't sound like a hill he'd go as far as to dying on, though. But yeah,
no.
I get you.
Yeah.
Well, if our Eastern Orthodox friends are utilizing Price's work, then they ought to know this footnote where he unequivocally says, "But was condemned as a fake in the Acts of the Sixth Council."
Yeah.
Right, and he again, like you said, he offers. I'm assuming attempting to remain transparent when he talks about doubt in its authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely. So how about we snag some questions? That'd be good for y'all. Okay. Let me go all the way up as far up as I can, and then we'll work our way down. So earlier, by the way, I don't know if he's still here, but John Colarafi, thank you so much. Earlier, you had a question. So take questions. I want to take questions from our members. If you are a member, drop a question. We'll take yours. We'll take members. John Colarafi earlier said that before it's over, I'd like to see Father Kappes address the question of whether the condemnation of Pope Vigilius was excised from the Acts of the Council. I know, John Colarafi, you have written a book several years back where I don't know if you've dealt with any of this, but your book, I believe, Keys Over the Christian World. Thank you for that contribution to the world of the papacy. But yeah, John, thank you for that question. Father, how would you answer that to John?
The only thing I could say on this is I've read some statements by Price to this effect. This wasn't the topic that I was looking at. I did not see statements by Price that claim that he was condemned. I saw statements by Price that go over the earlier version of the Acts, where there are kind of sideswipes taken against the Pope, and these sideswipes treat him as if he is out of communion with the other patriarchs. Price makes a lot of points that they refuse to actually openly claim that he's been deposed or lost his office. And it's Price's opinion that the reason why the language is so indirect and non-canonical is because it's meant to morally pressure an already berated Vigilius to join in the party, right? To come and to throw in his lot with them. And so as I read Price on this topic, he looked at the Acts as being corrected to no longer sideswipe the Pope instead of a frontal attack, since he joined with the party. Now, maybe Karafi has spent some time in something that I've missed, and I'm happy to admit that I am not sure the exact text that he's referring to. But if he brought that before my eyes, I do my best to try to understand what's happening there.
Fantastic answer. Do you have anything to add to this, Brother James?
No. I think Father Kappes went over it perfectly.
Fantastic, great. Okay, and I did tag you, John. If you do have any follow-up, please let us know. We have Petros. Can we clarify one more time? How can one operation or one energy be understood in an orthodox way?
Okay. A really good example of this would be St. Gregory Nazianzen, who talks about the one energy of the three persons in the Trinity.
Right.
So if all of them have one divinity, one will, and one energy, then there's one energy of God, one act. The way that a Thomist might talk about this is there's no difference between God's being and his act of existence. This is going to get more technical. So that in every way that God is something, he is acting. And what this will actually get into is you could understand in a Thomist way that there's one energy in an orthodox fashion in the God-man by saying that there's only one act of existence that projects itself forward in existence, and that is independent of everything else. But there is anything else other than the Word is a dependent kind of existence. It doesn't have its own independent act of existing. So Christ's humanity exists in a dependent way, in a subordinate way, in a non in a way that does not function on its own, and therefore it acts more like a part to a whole than it does like two wholes that are somehow together cooperating, which is considered to be a Nestorian approach.
Right.
So the one way that we could understand energia is an act of being. And if we actually look at St. Cyril, who is referenced as also having used the word one energy in his commentary on John, he reports that for anything that has a unity to all of its qualities or its activities, I don't want to say activities, it'll be redundant, to all of its qualities, its visible qualities, it must have one energy. And this was quoted at Lateran 649, I believe. And so this would be easy for a Thomist to understand, because what they would claim is, if we say that Jesus Christ is a one something, then there must be one act of his existence, one essay, they would say. And in that sense, we could be mono-energist in an Orthodox way. Because if there are two sources for that are somehow totally in existence, independent of anything else, and are acting in their own right, then that means Jesus' psychology is one where he could disagree potentially with the will of the Father, or he could exist psychologically in some way apart from the Word.
That was great when you broke that down, Father. Now, let me try and see if I grasped it. And if I got it wrong, don't hesitate to let me know. You never have in the past. So just tell me, hey, no, I think you're off the mark. So basically, in a way, in a non-monothelite manner, of course, the concept, speaking of one energy or one operation, in order to do that in an Orthodox non-monothelite manner, it would be sort of referring to the unified action of Christ's two natures working harmoniously, rather than collapsing them into a single will or energy. Would that be correct, or am I
it's actually a bit different.
Okay.
It would be saying that the foundation for all acts of the one Jesus Christ is the Word.
Okay.
That all psychological thinking and all psychological willing, doesn't matter which will, begins with the Word and terminates in whatever the intention of the Word was, not in what the intention of a human nature is.
Okay.
To have that kind of unity requires that there's only one act of existence. There's a one something. There aren't two somethings that are just morally cooperating with one another. And in that sense, you could say that there's one energy. Now, a Thomist in Greek would say there's to ine. So you would say that there is one being. But the participle esse, the infinitive esse means something like act of existing as well. So
it's fantastic. So pretty much that way would preserve diatheletism. It would be compatible with diatheletism and dienergism, I believe,
right,
as well.
Now, it's an open question as to how you would, using the philosophy and its distinctions that were present in the 6th century, how you would answer that question. We can answer that question with the advanced scholastic metaphysics. It may be harder to answer that question with what was available at that time.
Understood. Perfect. Okay.
So Saint Cyril says something similar in Thesaurus, his works. I put it in the Greek. Is that what he's referring to, Father?
Say again, please.
He says the divine essence is that which generates. The energy is that which produces. Nature and energy are not identical.
That isn't the one I was thinking of from the Thesaurus. I was thinking of his commentary on John.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. John Colorati returned. John, do you know what page that was on? If you could mention it, I don't know, maybe the page.
I mean, I have my copies, so if he
maybe that could help, John.
I'll take a look at it.
Yeah.
Condemnation is easy enough for me to
Okay.
church right now, the word condemnation. I have the acts right here.
Okay. Marcos.
Although there's probably a
Amor.
lot of condemnations in that.
Right. Oh, yeah. You're probably going to get like 300 hits or even more. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you looked it up. I'll just say Marcos Zamora, thank you so much. Yeah, it's a lot of information, definitely. And to our brother Hugo Osana, Hugo is a top-notch, one of the very best we've got in the Spanish-speaking world. A great, excellent Catholic apologist. He's fantastic. Thank you for the comment, brother. Yeah, Hugo, you're going to really just feast on this as you can get this information and you take this over into the Spanish-speaking Catholic world. If this is new for the English-speaking Catholic world, and this has been a sticking point for a while, this is groundbreaking to the point where it's just cutting-edge stuff, brother.
And it looked like there was an important question on Matthew 16:18. Are you going to take that?
Yes.
William?
Oh, yes.
That's in our book.
Absolutely, yes. And Logan, thank you so much for multiple super chats. And yes, Logan, I highly recommend you get a hold of our book on the papacy. If one of our mods, if one of our wonderful mods in the chat can post a link to our papacy book, we'd greatly appreciate it. Logan asks, can you explain Matthew 16:18? And the gates of hell will not prevail against the church. Is that referring to the church as a whole or to Peter's primacy? And if you want, I can tackle that while you look that up, Father.
Sure.
Or,
go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, Logan, first off, I highly recommend you snag our book. And here's the one thing that we do for all of our books that we put out. Sometimes people don't have the means to get the physical copies, or maybe their country doesn't ship them to them. It's too expensive. If you get Kindle Unlimited, whether a trial edition or whether you have Kindle Unlimited, you can begin reading all of the books that we've published. I really highly recommend you get a hold of it. But let me answer that to you. Very clearly, this is referring to the church, but you're not going to separate the vicar of Christ. You're not going to separate Peter from the church, because Peter is the representative, the vicar of Christ on earth. He is the leader of the Christian faithful. He is the shepherd. So you cannot separate him there from the church there. Very clearly, that is what is meant in Matthew 16:18. He is given the keys to the kingdom of heaven. And in our book on the papacy, as far as I know, and James, who is on the cutting edge of papal stuff, would probably know better. As far as I know, our book, in print at least, is the only one that deals with the patristic connections of Isaiah 22 and Matthew 16:18, showing the multiple church fathers that connect those verses. I don't know if anybody else has put something like that out in print.
Well, there is a wonderful connection to be made as well for Matthew 16:18.
Yes,
regarding prophet Jeremiah.
Oh yeah,
a lot of the church fathers, liken Saint Peter to Jeremiah a lot.
Yes,
and in Saint Peter. So in essence, just as our brother William said, you cannot separate the vicar of Christ and his commission, or his endowment, if you will. You cannot separate the primacy of Peter from the church. I would argue that it is referring to both church and Peter.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, and look, very clearly, as you know very well, James, you've done an insane amount of work in this. The fathers wouldn't have done that. They would not have. Oh, there we go. I think Father just found it. Let me post that. Give me 1 second. And I think you're still typing some stuff out. Is that right, Father?
No.
No, just that.
I've given you everything. I mean, the only thing I've found so far is that Price wants to argue that because, and he may be right. I mean, I may say it in an amusing way, but Price may be right, because he didn't say, Pope Vigilius, or Your Excellency Vigilius, or Awesome Vigilius. He meant condemned Vigilius.
Gotcha.
That's what I found so far. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's an explicit point that Price makes that Vigilius was somehow condemned in a version of the Acts, which really, I mean, to me wouldn't matter, because the only thing that matters is what is the version that was authenticated by the Pope of Rome and stored in both the Greek archives and the Latin archives. I mean, that's the dogmatic version, so it really doesn't matter.
Ultimately, that is what matters. And as James emphasized it earlier, and you emphasized it, Father, drafts don't matter. Ultimately, the final edition is what matters. And I think that people are forgetting that. That is not what is being.
I'd rather be condemned in 1,000 drafts by 1,000 councils than by one decree and one real council.
Yes,
Right.
That's a fantastic point. But let me put it up there for the audience. The omission of all honorifics, and even of the title Pope or Archbishop of Rome, implies that Vigilius was judged worthy of condemnation and deposition, even though the penalty formally imposed falls short of this and is limited to deletion from the diptychs. The Council Fathers insist below that they have no wish for a formal break with the Roman. I think you meant to finish Roman Pontiff, right? Or Roman.
They have no wish for with Rome. So I mean, if that reflects the rest of the book, it's hard to understand where the condemnation is.
Yeah.
I mean, to kind of use kind of scratch your eye out catty language.
Yeah.
Isn't exactly what we're kind of looking for when we have a smoking gun.
Yes, absolutely.
For Petros' statement, pretty much, you got the Synod of Rome, you've got the Synod of Constantinople, and you've got them agreeing that within their proper archived transcripts of the Fifth Ecumenical Council at the Sixth Ecumenical Council, you have them recording the very notion that within their archived official transcripts, there is no use of the term one energy.
Yeah.
And so therefore, you've got the prime see and the see that is after the prime see. You've got Elder Rome and New Rome, and you've got them pretty much saying the same exact thing. There is no heresy that is one energy, if you will, or monoenergism that we can attribute to Vigilius based upon their records in the Latin and the Greek.
Let me pick up. He did. Thank you, John, for the page. Here's what Price writes on page 74, starting at 73. Speaking in acceptance of the decree, Eutychius again avoided criticizing Vigilius and emphasized that the churches were to remain in communion. Such a distinction between the see still in communion with the other churches and the holder of the see excluded from communion implied that Vigilius was suspended in office. So far I'm hearing about some sort of implication, which means that I, as a historian, am trying to read the implications because I don't have an artifact. This fell short of a full condemnation. So now he's saying he wasn't condemned, involving deposition and excommunication. So it sounds like I'm seeing that Price says the opposite so far. That would have broken the communion between the Eastern churches. So if he was condemned in such a way that he didn't break communion between the Eastern churches and the Roman See. He was condemned in such a way that there was no excommunication. He was condemned in such a way that there was no deposition. He was condemned in such a way that there was no one in the West that was excluded from communion that was in his jurisdiction. That would have broken the communion between the churches and the Roman See, thereby damaged. Now, maybe there's something more. This is looking kind of, page 74 is looking really bad for this kind of argument.
Yeah, really
thereby
bad.
damaged the ecumenical status of the council. The decree is dated to 14 July, almost 2 months after the session, which shows that its wider publication was delayed, doubtless in hope that Vigilius would capitulate and make the publication unnecessary. And indeed, when the very end of the year, Vigilius finally assented to condemn the 3 chapters, a new edition of the Conciliar Acts was produced, from which this decree and other embarrassing documents contained in the record of session 7 were expunged. So once again, John's not making any arguments. He's just asking for my opinion. So this is not responding to John. This is responding to individuals who think that there's something significant here.
Yeah.
What Price is saying as a historian, which I'm perfectly fine in saying everything you said was true, Price, from a religious perspective. He's saying drafts of minutes of an ongoing meeting originally said, down with the chairman. We hate the chairman. Death to the chairman. Burn the pants of the chairman. Okay, that's fine. That's what they said. That's what the draft said. But by the time the meeting was done, it said, we love the chairman. The chairman's a good guy. And everybody voted for that version of the minutes. Okay, fine. I mean, what does that prove? The final version of an ecumenical council that is approved by a Roman pontiff, or the final version that is in the patriarchal archives, which is opened up in 680 AD, that is the authentic version read at the council and approved by all the fathers in 680 AD, that's what dogmas are about.
Right. That's
what historians are interested in is that, you know, the earliest version, is that the, you know, the middle of the way version, you know, how'd you get to the final version? I mean, that's all very, very interesting, and it certainly can bring up questions of how inspired these fathers were if they have to keep changing their minutes, you know, and all kinds of questions.
Yeah.
Now, from a Catholic dogmatic point of view, by the way, the minutes of ecumenical councils are not dogmatic. For Orthodoxy, they oftentimes treat them that they are. So the people that I've heard talking about this in Orthodoxy somehow want to claim that the very minutes of the ecumenical councils are dogmatic. A Catholic treatment of minutes. So sometimes the minutes have people saying pretty awful things because it's just it's recording what what Mussolini said during the meeting. So we have our our ancient versions of Mussolini who's saying some pretty wild stuff in these minutes. I don't know how we want to consider these minutes to be dogmatic. All they are is the officially approved record of what all the fathers say officially happened.
Yeah.
Right. So that we're kind of claiming that there's a lot of threats here to the papacy is basically saying I mean to me it's like saying Robert's rules of order prove the Catholic Church wrong. I don't think so. I don't think that the Catholic Church has ever built its the Catholic Church may be wrong from a theoretical point of view, but it's not based off of the minutes of ecumenical councils.
Yeah. Excellent point.
So, I mean, I do appreciate him highlighting that, and maybe there's something I missed that he saw that I didn't. But I think I read a pretty representative portion of page 74.
Yes. Yeah, no doubt. In fact, let me, in case anybody does have any other questions, let me look at let me put the final two slides up and let me read them. These are problems that people. That either doesn't matter whether the Orthodox or Protestant or evangelical, doesn't matter. These are issues that are faced by those that try to utilize this to try to tear down the Catholic view of the papacy. Number one, we do not possess today any longer the authentic Greek Acts and decrees of Constantinople II in Greek. The last known copy was lost after Nicholas of Cusa at the Council of Florence in AD 1438. The acts in possession of the Archbishop of Constantinople in AD 680. Number two, the authentic Greek acts contain references to two libelli of Vigilius, Constitutum 1.
That's wrong. That should say Judicatum 1 and Judicatum 2. So I apologize. That's my error.
Okay, Judicatum 1 and Judicatum 2. Okay. The position of Constantinople III's Greek fathers, as approved by Pope Agathos Legate thereto, is that the Latin version of the libelli of Vigilius are inauthentic, and that a better version of these documents exists in the patriarchal archives, which even the Latin legates agree exists. 3, proofs are also given for the interpolations and additions of the letter of Menas to Vigilius that first used the word one energy. Brother James, you want to read these final ones?
Sure. The council exonerated both Menas and Vigilius multiple times in its solemn judgments. We just read that. Eastern Orthodox who hold the supreme decisions of ecumenical councils on matters of heresy and orthodoxy must conclude that Vigilius never erred either on monoenergism nor in his libelli, since the judges and the council fathers declared the Latin version falsified and interpolated and reverenced both the writings and the memory of Vigilius in the annals of orthodoxy. Any attempt to arrogate private or historical judgments to oneself is a claim to have greater knowledge, discernment, and authority on ecclesiastical matter than an ecumenical council, that putatively supreme arbiter of orthodoxy for Eastern Orthodox Christians and the final court of appeals. It is to reject point 6. It is to reject the decision and the vote of an ecumenical council and its fathers when one impugns or accuses Vigilius, who was examined officially and approved by all the fathers, the Pope, and the Emperor in the official acts. Vigilius's documents were authenticated in 680 AD, declared orthodox, and the questions around the Latin version of the Judicatum, both 1 and 2, and the one energy statement concerned the current version of the Latin Acts published by Price, not the Greek Acts that were authenticated by Constantinople and Pope Agatho in AD 680.
Is that a pretty accurate summation there, Father?
You're muted,
I believe
Father.
you. Yeah, I believe you are muted. Let me see. I try to unmute.
Are we ready
Here
for
we go.
part 2?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
So I have my Vigilius part 2. This is going to address the claim that there is a issue of papal infallibility as a result of Pope Vigilius reversing his decision to not condemn dead people, and then his decision to reverse that is to condemn dead people. We all get that?
Yep.
So did you put slides together for this too, James?
What part is that, Father?
It was probably too late for you to have a copy of this. Why don't you put up the paper, William?
Yeah. Let me get part 2.
What you did last time, William, was perfect because it was really large.
Yeah. I'll do that again. I believe it is titled Vigilius 2. Is that correct, Father?
It's called Vigilius 2.
Yeah, I got you.
Sorry, guys. For anyone watching, there are 260 people here. I don't know if you guys realize, and perhaps the fellows will espouse the statement. This is earth-shattering. This is very different. Yep. This is never before seen, and most of what we come across, such as Price's work, is translated from the Latin. Guys, this is new stuff. Hold on to it, and don't let anyone do anything. Don't let anyone tell you that a statement that isn't in the final acts, that isn't declared dogmatic and elevated, don't let them use these statements to somehow erode papal claims. Don't just.
And for that matter, when you go to your Lions Club meeting, don't let anybody try to push on you the unapproved minutes.
Yeah. Yep. You're right about that. No doubt.
That's not how parliamentary procedure works.
I will never understand why people make the
Hey,
mistake.
William, aren't you supposed to be finding a paper?
I got it right here. My bad.
Ah.
But I will never understand.
I was trying to keep you busy so you couldn't talk, and you still do it anyway.
Yeah, you got me. I got the paper, though. I'll never understand why people just confuse the acts as being, like infallible decrees. There we go. I got the paper up. Oh, what am I doing? Let me see if it appears big here. If not, I will share my screen. Yeah, let me share it instead.
Yeah, and as large as you can make it for everybody's ease of reading.
Yeah, I got it. Here we go. Okay, we got it.
All right. So the issue that we're dealing with is what is called papal infallibility. It sounds like pretty much the lion's share of our readers here have been exposed to that. There's 3 parts of papal infallibility according to Vatican I at Pastor Eternus, and we need to see if these 3 pieces are in any way challenged by Vigilius. Mm-hmm. The first is, if there's a dogmatic definition by a pope, it has to be explicitly addressed to the entire juridical church. That's a way of saying there must be some explicit way in which all Christians who are Catholic, that is under the Pope's jurisdiction,
yep,
are being told this is what you must believe, right? If it's not explicit, then we can doubt if it's an infallible statement. 2, a dogmatic definition must explicitly, in the aforesaid statement, invoke apostolic authority on the judgment. So some ways that popes do this is I define, declare in my office of confirming the brethren, in my role as successor to Peter. They have to claim that they're doing this in their official universal capacity, not as the local bishop of Rome or as a theologian. And then lastly, a dogmatic definition must cover faith. Oftentimes we split this into 2 sections, faith and morals. And what we mean by faith is an abstract idea that demands us to assent to what we should think about God, or morals, an abstract idea about what is good or bad to do, right? What is objectively good or bad to do.
Yep.
So what we should think about God and his creation as divinely revealed, or about how we should act towards God or his creation. Those are the proper objects, the proper study materials of infallibility.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's take a look at what Vigilius did.
Yep.
So let's see if he qualifies under Vatican I. So here's the text according to Price. Who's this addressed to? Well, go ahead and read it, just the first line there.
To his most glorious and clement son, Justinian Augustus, Bishop Vigilius.
Well, we can't claim that the document as a whole is clearly addressed to all Christians. We need to find something in this very long document that explicitly addresses all Christians. That to address Justinian is not sufficient to meet the criteria of Vatican I.
Yep.
So the text as a whole is addressed to Justinian, I note, not the entire church. Hence, we must look for a statement of assertion that is addressed within this document to the entire church for it to be infallible. As the document as a whole is official, it is what we call magisterial. So if we accept the fact that Vigilius did write this because it has in some way been authenticated in a pontifical archive or some such, or a pope has authenticated it as a real document, or an ecumenical council has, then the next step is to admit that it's magisterial. But to be extraordinary magisterium, that is to be a Vatican I papal infallibility kind of document, it has to be, something in there has to explicitly address all the faithful. So until we get to something saying that, we don't have anything infallible. It's pretty black and white, though this tends to be a really hard concept for people that are really angry at popes.
Yep.
Constitutum number 26. Here's what I could find that might qualify under papal infallibility. This is the best I could do. Maybe somebody could do better. He says, lest before the promulgation of our sentence, that is, the sentence of the Apostolic See, over which by the grace of God we preside, so that sounds like he's doing something official in this section, they should try to issue something that might revive the occasion of scandal that has been put to rest. So here we see the Apostolic See is judging something that is an occasion of scandal. So it's a situation that could cause other people to lose their faith, other people to doubt the church, other people to wonder about God's providence. This sounds like the meat or idol controversy that St. Paul had to deal with in Corinthians. And his whole point is, I don't care if you eat meat, just don't scandalize anyone.
Right.
Don't ask where the meat is from, or else you're going to learn that it was offered to an idol and you can't eat it. That doesn't sound like faith and morals. That sounds like scandal. Scandal is not about whether something is a good or bad act in and of itself as a matter of faith or a matter of morals. Scandal is about whether or not the act has an effect on others.
Right, offending others.
Yeah, so that's the best I could find there. Let's see with the Constitutum 303. You want to read that for us?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Behold, venerable emperor, it is proved with dazzling clarity that it has always been our will in respect of the reverence due to the 4 holy synods, that whatever by the holy fathers assembled at the same was defined or decreed or resolved should remain inviolate.
So he's saying
go ahead.
he's saying here, ditto
Yeah.
to everything that was ever said dogmatically. Ditto. So that's not declaring anything new. Go ahead.
Yep. Maintaining, therefore, everything that is contained in the verdicts of the Holy Fathers and the representatives of the Apostolic See, respecting the letter of Ebus and his person. Let us and all Catholics unanimously be satisfied by what the Holy Synod exclaimed would satisfy itself when it said at that point, let him now anathematize Nestorius and his doctrines.
So the question is, should we be satisfied with a guy saying, I anathematize Nestorius and his doctrines, or should we not be satisfied with him? So this is apparently a matter of faith and morals, whether we should be satisfied or not satisfied with whether a guy said, let Nestorius and his doctrines be. Should he say more? Should he have said more?
Oh.
That's the question. Should he have said more? This is apparently the matter of faith and morals that is going to bring the church to its knees. Go ahead.
Wow. By this so often repeated anathema of the most wicked Nestorius and Eutyches, Bishop Ebus satisfied the will of the synod. Now that this had been determined by ourselves with all and every care and caution, so as to preserve inviolable both reverence towards the above-mentioned synods and also their venerable decrees, we, remembering that it is written that we should not transgress the bounds of our fathers, enact and decree that no one with ecclesiastical dignity and rank is permitted to hold or write or produce or compose or teach anything about the oft-mentioned 3 chapters contrary to what we have declared and enacted in this present decree, or to raise any further inquiries subsequent to the present definition. But if in the name of anyone with ecclesiastical dignity and rank there has been, or will have been, done, said and written, by whomsoever and wheresoever is to transpire anything in breach of what we have declared and enacted concerning these 3 chapters, this we totally annul with the authority of the Apostolic See, over which by the grace of God we preside.
Wow.
So this thing has tons of anathemas in it. Here he just annuls anybody's authority to write different than what he's saying. He claims that this is an exercise of supreme jurisdiction, which is different than infallibility.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
He's claiming that it's among the 3 things to be done, whether or not we can ruin a dead man's reputation, who died with a good reputation, and whether or not we should have asked more of someone who was let go by a council.
Can we see that citation?
Which
one?
The 206.
Oh, I don't know if it is here in the bottom. Is it here in the bottom?
Okay, then it's okay.
Yeah, it might be.
It's probably at the end of the document.
Yeah, let me go.
There's no point in going all the way. Okay.
Yeah. I'm not sure. Yeah,
because that's a really interesting citation, Father, to have.
Those for me were the best representatives of doctrinal statements I could find. If somebody can find a better one, then that's great.
Yeah.
Nobody among. So my conclusions: nobody among all Christians by apostolic authority. I have a homonym there. Is allowed. My misspelling. To write or say anything other than what is described in these pages of the 3 chapters. Basically, he does invoke his apostolic authority, so we got that part of Vatican I.
Yeah.
All juridical members of the church are addressed on the matter of the 3 chapters. It doesn't quite explicitly say that. It's more like as any cleric or anyone says something. It's not as explicit as we would like for an infallible decree, but you know what? I'll grant it. I'll grant that we have 2 out of 3, just for the sake of argument. But the problem is the object in writing anything contrary to the whole of this document. So what is the whole of the document? It claims to repeat decisions of dogma and discipline to previous councils. So that stuff is infallible by virtue of being an ecumenical council, and that's what he already said. But also to do something new, to restrict applying penalties to the dead. So I'm not going to apply penalties to a dead man. And I don't want to. That's what this is. The question is whether damnatio memoriae, damning someone's memory after they're dead, which is a pagan practice, is able to be practiced on dead Christians too. There is, until this time, no conciliar canons. There's no councils. that have been received by Rome or Constantinople into their canonical collections on the issue of condemning people that are already dead who died in the bosom of the church. The issue is not of past dogmas or discipline in these churches. So the question then becomes, does the binding and loosing power of Peter, extend to dead people? So let's look at a thesis that was which was recently published on this by Harrington. You may even know this guy, William.
I think I've heard of him.
Yeah.
So have I.
So go ahead and read the excerpt after footnote 86, if you would, William.
Oh,
Sure. You want to dive in, James? Go ahead.
it doesn't matter.
If you can see it, go ahead, James.
Yeah, go ahead.
Vigilius's approach on Theodore of Mopsuestia differed. He anathematized 60 of his extracts, but refused to condemn him, as he had died in the peace of the church. Importantly, in his defense of Theodore, he quoted passages from 2 letters in the Collectio.
No, what that means is he quoted 2 letters from a collection of documents that we're about ready to investigate, which is a really important collection of documents that show what was in the mind of Vigilius when he changed his mind.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The report of the Synod of Rome, 495, and Gelasius the First's letter to Dardanians, which discuss the power to bind and loose and the limitations of that power in regard to the deceased.
So in the Roman practice, there's this reticence to get too involved with trying to bind and loose what's happening with the dead, right?
Right.
Some exceptions to that are clearly indulgences, right?
Dude, would you like me to continue?
I think that's all I have
On that one.
That my comments are so the answer whether or not this is a dogma depends on whether damning someone's memory is taken as a statement that determines the eternal lot of their soul, or merely their reputation of a person who deserves to be condemned after death, though they enjoyed fame while they lived.
Yeah.
So the question is whether or not we merely determine the person's reputation among the living, or whether this involves binding or loosing in the afterlife. If the former, it's discipline. If the latter, maybe it's dogma. So let's take a look at what Vigilius, as Harrington found out, quoted from documents that happen to be in a collection, which is a collection of documents from the same date, which also contain Vigilius's own Constitutum. Very interesting. So what are the changes in the ordinary magisterium or papal canonical sentences that Vigilius would have known about before he decided to change his opinion? Okay. What are the paradigms for a pope changing his mind? So some of you have heard of Eusebius's church history.
Right.
He wrote it in the 4th century, and it was translated into Latin, so that by the 400s, everybody was reading it in Latin, right? William, I'm going to let you read this very, very, very long passage, but it's going to prove to us that everybody already knew that it was legitimate for popes to change their decisions. So let's see what Eusebius and Irenaeus say, both in the Latin and the Greek languages available at the time, and everybody had read about popes changing their opinions.
Eusebius of Caesarea, who separately noted that Pope St. Victor became aware of a group of Christians who celebrated Easter according to a Jewish reckoning that did not require Easter to fall on Sunday. Eusebius records, Victor, who presided over the church at Rome, immediately attempted to cut off from the common unity the dioceses of all Asia with the churches that agreed with them as heterodox, and he wrote letters and proclaimed by voice of herald all the brethren there wholly excommunicate. But this did not please all the bishops, and they besought him to consider the things of peace and of neighborly unity and love. Words of theirs are extant, forcefully rebuking Victor. Among them was Irenaeus, who, sending letters in the name of the brethren in Gaul, over whom he presided, maintained that the mystery of the resurrection of the Lord should be observed only on the Lord's Day. He fittingly admonishes Victor that he should not cut off whole churches of God, which observe the tradition of an ancient custom. And after many other words, he proceeds as follows. For the controversy is not only concerning the day, but also concerning the very manner of the fast. For some think that they should fast one day, others two, yet others more. Some, moreover, count their day as consisting of 40 hours day and night. This variety in its observance has not originated in our time, but long before in that of our ancestors. It is likely that they did not hold to strict accuracy, and thus formed a custom for their posterity, according to their own simplicity and peculiar mode. Yet all of these lived nonetheless in peace, and we also live in peace with one another. And the disagreement regarding the fast confirms the agreement in the faith. He adds to this the following account, which I may properly insert. Among these were the presbyters before Soter, who presided over the church which you now rule. We mean Anicetus, and Pius, and Hyginus, and Telesphorus, and Sistus. They neither observed it themselves, nor did they permit those after them to do so. And yet, though not observing it, they were nonetheless at peace with those who came to them from the parishes in which it was observed. Although this observance was more opposed to those who did not observe it, but none were ever cast out on account of this form. But the presbyters before you who did not observe it sent the Eucharist to those of other communities who observed it. And when the blessed Polycarp was at Rome in the time of Anicetus, and they disagreed a little about certain other things, they immediately made peace with one another, not caring to quarrel over this matter. For neither could Anicetus persuade Polycarp not to observe what he had always observed with John, the disciple of our Lord, and the other apostles with whom he had associated. Neither could Polycarp persuade Anicetus to observe it, as he said that he ought to follow the customs of the presbyters that had preceded him. But though matters were in this shape, they communed together. And Anicetus conceded the administration of the Eucharist in the church to Polycarp, manifestly as a mark of respect. And they parted from each other in peace. But those who observed and those who did not, maintaining the peace of the whole church. Thus Irenaeus, who truly was well named, became a peacemaker in this matter, exhorting and negotiating in this way in behalf of the peace of the churches. And he confirmed by letter about this mooted question with not only with Victor, but also with most of the other rulers of the churches.
So what we have here is that a pope changes his mind based off of more evidence and of decrees of previous popes.
Yeah.
The idea is that he actually has taken in what other popes' practices are, and he's changed his mind, right? So this is a very famous example. Tertullian, in our book on the papacy, also had a famous example of mentioning this.
Oh, yeah.
So we see that this pope, he intervenes in Asian dioceses. This is very much like St. Paul rebuking St. Peter. And Peter changes his practice of not sitting with the Gentiles at table in certain instances. Mm-hmm. So Peter also changes his practice. We also know in Latin that there was the famous situation of Pope St. Victor, who changed a number of administrative positions on forgiveness of sins that Tertullian calls discipline. Yeah. And he decided, the Pope, St. Victor, decided his policies, changing his policies in favor of mutual toleration of 2 Easters. But he also cited the precedent of St. Victor. Pope St. Victor considers the documentary evidence, new information, and he revokes an excommunication. Tertullian, Irenaeus, and Eusebius do not express any faults in their works of these popes, in their interventions outside of Rome, nor in their dioceses, in these dioceses. But Tertullian, Irenaeus, and Eusebius refer to a pope reversing his decision only after becoming aware of his predecessor's decisions. So this is the paradigm in the most popular literature at the time. Next, there's this big codex we heard called the Collectio. It's actually called the Collectio Avellana. We heard that Pope Vigilius is quoting documents that are in the Collectio Avellana, which is the same collection of documents that also has Pope Vigilius's Constitutum, the book that says you don't condemn dead people, right? That gets reversed. This seems like we can infer, according to people who know codexes or texts very well, we can infer from this that this is a relevant document at the time. Both the Pope is using it as well as other Latin scholars. But what else is in this Collectio Avellana, which contains Pope Vigilius's Constitutum? Would you go ahead and read the highlighted part on William for the letters 41 to 50? This is from Harrington and his On the Roman Church.
Instead, I suggest he was interested in providing examples of a pope changing his ruling on Pelagius. Pope Zosimus, 417-418, first overturned Innocent I's judgment on Pelagius, then reversed his own.
Ooh, so now we have two popes who have reversed their own judgment on Pelagius.
Wow.
Nobody seems to have had a problem with that. Let's continue on.
Yeah.
And that document, by the way, is found in the same collection, which dates to about the time of Vigilius, we know, and is used by a pro-Vigilius party.
Yeah.
The next section, why don't you go ahead and read probably from the top, the key letters.
Okay. James,
And
you want to take that one?
CA just means the collection.
Avellana.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
Avellana.
The key letters of the section are Collectio Avellana 41, in which Innocent condemned Pelagius, and 3 letters of Zosimus, collection 45, 46, and 50. In condemning Pelagius, Innocent endorsed the decisions of 2 African synods held in 416 AD. On Innocent's death, Celestius, Pelagius's major follower, went to Rome and submitted himself to the new pope's judgment. In the first of his letters to Aurelius and all African bishops, Zosimus told the African bishops that they had been too hasty in their judgment and called on those who had a case against Pelagius to appear in Rome within 2 months. Subsequently, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
Subsequently, in a somewhat opaque letter, Zosimus cleared Pelagius. After the African bishops appealed to the Emperor Honorius at Ravenna, Zosimus backtracked.
So, is Vigilius the first guy to ever reverse his his decision to condemn someone?
No, not at all.
No, we have Pope Saint Victor. We now have Zosimus. This is not a scandal. Continue.
In his letter of 21st of March 418, which is replete with assertions of papal authority, he informed them that we have done nothing that we would not refer to you by letter, and we are giving this in a fraternal spirit and consulting on common basis, not because we do not know what needs to be done, but because in an equal manner we wish to share with you the management of the person who had been accused before you. Zosimus's volte-face was complete.
Okay, so this is stuff that is very famous at the time. So Vigilius knows this before he changes his judgment on condemning or not condemning someone. Let's read the last one, if you would, William.
Yeah, definitely. You want me to read from the top or the highlighted?
Yeah, I think from the top.
The contemporary relevance of the argument is, I suggest, apparent in a letter that Gregory the Great, as a deacon to Pelagius II, sent to the archbishop and bishops of Istria during the schism that followed Vigilius's condemnation of the 3 chapters. Gregory sought to address their concern that they were expected to move to a position which, at the beginning of the controversy, the apostolic see and all the leading prelates in Latin provinces had strongly resisted. Gregory presented what Robert Marcus has described as the first occasion of a careful defense of the change of mind on the part of the papacy. Gregory argued that God had allowed Paul to turn from being a longtime opponent of the Christian faith to becoming its preacher. Further, under correction from Paul, Peter changed his position on not admitting Gentiles to communion without circumcision. Paul publicly pointed out to Peter that even though he was a Jew, he lived as a Gentile and consequently could not expect Gentiles to become Jews.
Okay. So now we have Gregory the Great, who is arguing that popes biblically change their minds.
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem like whatever we're supposed to believe that popes think that they can and can't do. So whatever we're supposed to think that popes think that they can and can't do, the misrepresentative ideas are that popes can never change their minds on condemnations, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
Condemnations of persons are not acts of faith, and they're not acts of morals. In the church's canon law, what you do is you take evidence and you make the best judgment you can with the evidence. There is no infallible judging of a person.
Mm-hmm.
That this person is good, or I know that this person's soul, I know all their thoughts and their memories, and therefore I know that they are evil. That we don't have this kind of theology in the Catholic Church, and I would suppose that it does not exist in the Eastern Orthodox Church either. But this is the standard that Vigilius is being held to.
Yeah.
So Vigilius claims that he's revising his opinion, but he, as Price also notices, cites St. Augustine in his retractions. Just off the cuff, guys, any gut feeling as to, at the Council of 553, why it would be important for Vigilius to say, I'm being like St. Augustine?
Like St. Augustine, man, you got me there.
Why is he telling the fathers of the Council of 553, I'm just like St. Augustine?
Man, off the top of my head, I can't think of that. James, you have any idea?
No.
Because St. Augustine is an explicitly approved father of
orthodoxy, correct?
Of orthodoxy, and that all of his writings are approved.
Oh,
he's named. He's named in the councils.
That's right.
Yeah,
there's
I'm
about 11 to 13 names, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And the principal argument for being able to condemn dead people at the Council 553 are citations from Augustine.
Yeah, I got you. For some reason, I was thinking of Augustine changing his mind and reversing his mind and something. Okay, I get you. That's a great example. Yeah, Augustine was definitely referred to and as all of his works being orthodox there and venerated very highly.
So I get the impression with Price's comments, he's free to comment this way, and he may be right. But I get the impression that he wasn't very impressed by Vigilius claiming that he was just following Augustine's retractions. So I wanted to see, well, I mean, is that because, Price saw kind of the context for Augustine and his retractions and Vigilius, and there was no parallels, and Vigilius was just kind of pulling this out of thin air to try to justify himself?
Right.
Well, my conclusions, I think, are very positive on this. So the word retractions, unlike our first meaning in English, in Latin means something like a second self-critical look at one's literary production by the author himself as an act of humility.
Okay.
So to write a retraction is actually something that was invented by Augustine. Nobody before this is ever cited as having written a retraction. So he invented his own genre of work.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And the one person that actually wrote his own retractions in imitation of Augustine was the Venerable Bede. That's the only other saint of the church that we have, or historical figure. So I provide a hyperlink in the paper to Augustine's letter to Marcellinus. What is he's getting ready to write his retractions. What does he say he's getting ready to do? One of the two of you can feel free to read this section.
I'll go ahead. No. Oh, you go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
Yep.
I'll do the next one.
No, go for it. It doesn't matter.
Okay. I freely confess, accordingly, that I endeavor to be one of those who write because they have made some progress, or who, by means of writing, make further progress. If therefore, through inadvertence or want of knowledge, anything has been stated by me, which may with good reason be condemned, not only by others who are able to discover this, but also by myself. For if I ought, making progress, I ought, at least after it has been pointed out, to see it. Such a mistake is not to be regarded with surprise or grief, but rather forgiven, and made the occasion of congratulating me, not, of course, on having erred, but on having renounced an error. For there is an extravagant perversity in the self-love of the man who desires other men to be in error. that the fact of his having erred may not be discovered. How much better and more profitable is it that in the points in which he has erred, others should not err, so that he may be delivered from his error by their advice, or if he refuses, may at least have no followers in his error. For if God permit me, as I desire, to gather together and point out, in a work devoted to this, the things which most justly displease me in my books, men will then see how far I am from being a partial judge in my own case.
Okay, so that's how he thinks about what he's getting ready to do. That's pretty much what Vigilius is doing.
Yeah.
Letter to Quod Deus. This is while he's writing his retractions. So that was when he was intending to write them. Now, what does he say when he's writing them? Go ahead.
I am busy over a very urgent matter. I am passing in review all my writings, and am writing to show, either by correcting or by defending it, what should be and can be read, where, that is, anything I have written displeases me or might give offense to others.
And this sounds like what Vigilius is claiming that he's doing in his second Constitutum. Augustine's retractions. Let's read from the preface, please. This is 426, 427.
For I am now writing treatises in which I have undertaken to retract my smaller works, for the purpose of demonstrating that even I myself have not in all things followed myself. But I think that with God's mercy, I have written progressively and not begun from perfection. Since indeed I speak more arrogantly than truly, if even now I say that I have at length in this age of mine arrived at perfection, without any error in what I write. But the difference is in the extent and the subject of an error, and the facility with which anyone corrects it. Or is it pertinacity with which one endeavors to defend his error? Certainly there is good hope of that man, whom the last day of his life shall find so progressing that whatever was wanting to his progress may be added to him, and that he should be adjudged rather to need perfecting than punishment.
This sounds like Vigilius may have been reading the retractions in order to get some consolation.
Right.
Now, analyses of Augustine's retractions by scholars lead to the fact that Augustine basically holds two kinds of retractions within his works. The first kind of retraction that he does is on doctrines of the faith, on religious matters that he considers to be of orthodoxy or heterodoxy. But there's also a second group of retractions that he does, mainly on scriptural exegesis, but he claims that that is based off of better knowledge of original text, where he's changing his interpretation of a text because he's done work on the Greek or the Hebrew, right?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? Price agrees that Vigilius thinks that he's doing something like scriptural exegesis, not doctrine of the faith. In Price's own words, he sees Vigilius making reference to himself as having better knowledge of the original texts, like in Augustine's self-examples of scriptural exegesis. So Price himself, in his own words, his own opinion, would agree with my own reading of this, which is Vigilius is referring to Augustine's retractions, the part where he changes his opinion because there's new evidence, and it's not on a matter of faith and morals. So that's kind of a big deal.
Very big deal.
Vigilius invokes his own correction of the Constitutum to be in imitation of number 2, the non-doctrinal level, namely the correcting of a biblical interpretation based on better knowledge of the original manuscripts or better reading of competing texts. Let's read from Vigilius's famous decretal letter, which he writes to Eutychius. Okay.
Yeah, I'll dive in. Wherefore, on account of our desire that you, my brothers, should know what we have done in this matter, we make it known to you by this letter. For no one can doubt how many were the discussions raised on account of the 3 chapters. That is, concerning Theodore, sometime bishop of Mopsuestia, and his writings, as well as concerning the writings of Theodoret, concerning that letter which is said to have been written by Ibis to Maurus the Persian, and how diverse were the things spoken and written concerning these 3 chapters. Now, in every business, sound wisdom demands that there should be a retraction of what was propounded after examination. There ought to be no shame when what was at first omitted is made public after it is discovered by a further study of the truth. And if this is the case in ordinary affairs, how much more in ecclesiastical strifes should the same dictate of sound reason be observed, especially since it is manifest that our fathers, and especially the blessed Augustine, who was in very sooth illustrious in the divine scriptures, and a master in Roman eloquence, retracted some of his own writings and corrected some of his own sayings, and added what he had omitted and afterward found out. We, led by their example, never gave over the study of the questions raised by the controversy with regard to the before mentioned 3 chapters, nor our search for passages in the writings of our fathers, which were applicable to the matter. That is incredible. I had to make that go. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay. So apparently this is 3 years of back and forth, in my opinion, because nobody bothers to read all the texts which are being cited by the very council fathers.
Right.
Conclusions. Eusebius, the anonymous compiler of the Eusebius plus the anonymous compiler of this Collectio Avellana, which also includes Vigilius's Constitutum, as well as Gregory the Great, all witness to a regular papal policy of reversing condemnations of people based upon new or fuller evidence, both before, during, and after Vigilius. The preeminent evidence for condemning the deceased Catholic Bishop Theodore of Mopsuestia at Constantinople II was found in statements made by St. Augustine of Hippo, who is called an approved father on matters of dogma and doctrine, whatever he should teach. Augustine was willing and taught by example, by revising his own theological and interpretive opinions based upon that were based upon erring when he had new evidence.
Right.
Pope Vigilius admits changing his opinion according to the mind of Augustine, given new evidence about a condemnation of individual persons who died in communion with the church. Vigilius imitated the legal sentences of past popes and the humility of Augustine.
Beautiful.
Vigilius is commemorated as a saint in Constantinople III for his doctrine and example, and is exonerated of any doctrinal error or scandal in his works according to the authenticated acts acclaimed publicly by all the fathers of the council, the papal legates, and the Byzantine emperor. And I end my argument.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Tremendous.
Yeah, phenomenal.
Wow. Yeah.
I think I read over Pope Saint Zosimus's works. These are the ones that he writes to Aurelius, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I've read them actually, and I should have clicked in on that. I don't know why I didn't. That it is regular practice for an amendment to be made, right?
Yeah.
And just a question.
There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
There's just a question. How would they charge Vigilius of such a thing? Now maybe I'm gonna be a little rash here. I brought this up earlier, William, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, Father and William. There is a statement about Locutus, right? That says he is manifestly a heretic in the 1672 Pan-Orthodoxal Council of Jerusalem, and that it officially declares that he is a heretic.
You mean Lucaris?
Yeah, I said Locutus.
Yeah, you said Locutus.
Now you're condemning the dead.
Come on, James.
Oh my goodness, Dr. Locutus, rest in peace, great man.
Yep,
great man. Sorry, guys, I meant Lucaris.
No worries. We all make mistakes.
So I know that there's condemnations for Lucaris in the Council of Jassy and the Council of Bethlehem, Jerusalem, 1672. But they later amended this. The Patriarch of Constantinople later amended this and undid his condemnation. In 09, he is actually venerated as a saint in their church.
Well, it's an excellent parallel.
That's a great parallel.
And it's like, how do you come up with these whimsical, fantastic stories of how supposedly the Roman patriarch, the Roman bishop, the pontiff, did something that is against papal understanding, when in reality you are chock full of these examples in your church.
That's a great example. I hadn't thought about that. That's a great example.
I think the question might be is the Lucaris's sanctification accepted by all the autocephalous churches in their calendars? And if not, current Orthodoxy can argue that it's not something that they have to defend tooth and nail because it's only a local veneration.
Well, I don't think,
but it's an excellent example from the Greek position that illustrates exactly what you're saying.
Right. Well, actually, I think it's elevated to all. I think he is considered a saint for all in 09.
Okay. So, as far as you know, it was like absorbed into other people's.
Right. And if you read Jassy and if you read Bethlehem, Jerusalem, it's like devastating. It's the amount of anathemas they declare on him.
Oh yeah,
it's unreal. And then for them to turn around in 09 and to canonize him or to make him saint, and it's like, you guys come here with the Vigilius stories when Vigilius is telling you, well, look, I'm holding to what Saint Augustine held, or we understand that Vigilius is holding to what Saint Augustine held, which is exemplified by the history, such as other popes who understood through the acquiry of, greater knowledge meant an amending of, judgment. And you guys would agree. My Eastern Orthodox brothers and sisters, you would agree. You have saints that are privy to this very same scenario. And it's just ridiculous, right? Not to mention, sorry guys, not to cut you off.
No. Yeah, great. Keep it up.
Not to mention the amount of safeguards the Roman Synod had and the amount of codification for the understanding of why things are decreed and judged and pronounced versus the inundation of the Lucaris story. I don't even want to get into it yet. I mean, you have no stance. The Catholic Church, the Roman Pontiff, the Catholic Church had multiple views, be it the Augustinian view, be it the papal historical view. I don't know what you think, Father. Is that like a good claim to make, or
the example that you give is certainly a good parallel to say that in current Orthodoxy, it's perfectly fine for the Church of Christ to reverse its decisions on what to do with dead people that have been condemned, to exonerate them, or presumably, since they already accept the Fifth Ecumenical Council, to take people that died in the bosom of the church and to posteriorly excommunicate them. So it's simply saying that it doesn't threaten the Church of Christ, or else the Church of Christ would be threatened by the Lucaris situation.
Yeah.
And what else comes to mind, Father, and you could tell me if I'm wrong, is the Moekian controversy.
I don't know what that is.
The one where the marriage that the emperor,
I see,
he puts his wife into a cenobium so that he can marry his mother's maid, and it was all under the bishop's guise, and it was even officiated by Abbot Joseph, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, in these matters, I think to try to create parallels, we always want to make sure that we have kind of the documentation that something is sort of absorbed in pan-orthodoxy in order to be able to make our parallels. So I'm not familiar with the situation.
So the condemnation of the occurrence only occurs post-death of the emperor. So I have all these sources. I wrote a massive article on it.
Very nice.
So it's definitely, it's interesting how they would hold to these notions, right? And Saint Theodore the Studite actually is the one who highlights all these things, and he actually tells them that it's a good thing that you made this condemnation even after that he is dead, because it was an abuse, a sacramental abuse, right? The sacrament of matrimony.
Right.
I could send you the info on that, William, if you want.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to check that out, brother. Great point, sir. Any other thoughts, Father?
No, not too much. I kind of gave my spiel, which is basically I haven't followed any one apologist. I've never watched a full show, but of course, when I see it come up on the feeds, and then I see kind of summaries of the arguments, basically the snidbits that I've got, and then I'll ask you for clarification since you keep up on this stuff as much as you can, William. My impression has been is that there's a lot of people that are disturbed by the presentation of Vigilius. And there's a lot of people who feel triumphant about the alleged inconsistency of Vigilius. Well, what we're really seeing is every generation of popes had an inconsistency. It was called reversing one's judgment on a matter of condemning or exonerating a person. The new topic is whether or not that also extends to doing it to dead people. It stayed in the area of discipline. And there's really nothing to see here. We can now move on.
Fantastic points. Great points. That was excellent. That was fantastic. And I know we took, I think we had a large audience, and I think people misunderstood that we were wrapping up the show. They left early because we usually take the Q&A at the end, and we ended up taking it early. But we still have a good audience right now. But I think that was fantastic. That was great. Any concluding thoughts before we wrap up, Brother James?
No, I think the case of the anti-papal claims and the use of Vigilius, I think, is a thing of the past. Yeah. I don't see them. I don't know. In good faith, if you use it again, you're just dishonest.
Well, certainly, you two can hold people's feet to the fire, because they're going to have to come up with some way to counter the sources now that are available for everybody on the internet.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, no doubt. There is that information's out there now. So without a doubt, it'd be very interesting to see how people react. And one thing I'd like to say, that people, if you were edified by the show, don't forget to leave comments down below. Let us know. Help the video, the visibility with the algorithm. Make sure to flood the comment section with your thoughts. If you like it, you appreciate it. Do you want to see more shows like this? What kind of shows are you interested in? We definitely do read all the comments. We take everything into consideration. We love reading your comments, and everybody, we hope you've been edified, and we try to give it do as much justice as we could. And I think it was done very well. Now I will bother you, Father. Will you do us a great favor of perhaps closing out with a closing prayer? And maybe before the closing prayer, maybe if you want to talk about anything that you've been working on, unless it's top secret. Now you've been doing some incredible stuff there. I don't know if it's top secret, but for Ascension Press, and you've been doing some great stuff out there. Maybe you want to talk about that a little bit before.
Yeah, I just got the English translation of the Life of Anthony coming out, and also the Rule of Basil, and a New English translation, which is non-technical, that every person can just read it for their spiritual purposes and not get lost in weird vocabulary that doesn't feel like it's in the right century anymore.
Yeah.
So that'll be coming out, but I don't have much else to say other than that.
James, brother, I forgot to allow you to plug your channel, brother. Shout out to your channel. Plug it, brother. Anything you want to say?
My name is James. I have Divine Mercy Apologetics. I love you all. Thank you all for your support. Instagram, Divine Mercy Apologetics _ you guys can follow or subscribe to my YouTube, and thank you for everything. And I'm forever indebted to our lovely brother William, and excited to finally meet the powerhouse that is Reverend Father Dr. Kappes. And this is This is, I think, this is the funeral for the anti-papal Vigilius claims. So I was glad to be part of it.
Great.
Yes.
Well, we'll wrap up very briefly. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and the Holy Spirit, now and always, and forever and ever. Amen. Have a good night, gents.
Have a great night, everybody. God bless everybody.
God bless, guys.